All right, EJ, did you have to make a beer trip? What happened there?
No, I was thinking my time and you were thinking your time.
It said Central in the tweet, man.
In the tweet.
Yeah, you
I was like
retweeted it,
5:30. No, I
and
was like,
I said in
no,
my text
it's my brain, not your fault.
5:15 Central. That is just
No, I was just
let the
like,
record show
yes. If
that
we have to
Mr.
throw the
Snyder was
challenge,
the one that misunderstood the time that we're
that's
starting.
right. If we have to throw the challenge flag and watch the replay, JB will be proven correct. He will save the timeout. Yeah, he's all good.
I like those commercials. Those are pretty funny.
They are very funny commercials because I think they do hit the note that we all wish in our own life we had the challenge flag sometimes. Be like, no, man, no, you said it. You did. Like, seriously. Okay, fine. Here you go. Here's the flag.
I like the one with the couple, I guess. I'm assuming husband and wife, and the wife says something to the effect of, I love the part where you said, obviously I won't forget them, right? Like this, like, yeah. All right. So, season finale. We are done with this tank year, which was fun to cover part of, and then brutal at times. And there were times where there was just nothing nice to say, and that wasn't very fun. So, yeah, man, I don't know. I'm ready. I'm ready to move on. I'm ready to move on to something different.
Yeah, and something different is coming. Like, let's be super honest. I think we speculated before the year, hey, they could do this or they could do this. This might be their approach or this might be their approach. They might try and push it somewhere in the middle. They might try and win a few this year. They might try and just, clear the decks and go for the first pick. They tried some things, but I don't think they tried anything that might keep them out of contention for one of the top 3 picks. It was pretty clear that this team was going to be about getting rid of the excesses of the previous regime and making as clean a slate as possible for 2023. Like, that was the preeminent goal, and anything that interfered with that might have taken away from that particular focus was not considered and not done. And that means those of us that are really interested in multifaceted team building kind of had to sit on our hands this year, because they weren't going to do those things. They weren't going to comb the waiver wire. They weren't going to poach guys off the practice squad. They weren't going to, make a big splash in free agency. And you can look at Chase Claypool and say, hey, it's at the trade deadline, they did make a move for a wide receiver, one of the top wide receivers available. Yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, that's all they did. And that was purposeful. And you're right, the way you opened the show. We're now done with that, and we're moving on to something, it reminds me of and now for something completely different. They've got $100 million in free agency. They've got a boatload of draft picks, and they're about to have more if most of us are proven correct. They are in the driver's seat for the 2023 offseason in multiple ways. Top draft pick, top free agency available space in terms of cap. This offseason literally goes through the Bears. And
a lot of flights going to be going into O'Hare.
A lot of flights and a lot of limo service and shuttle service to house.
A lot of McCaskey Letterman jacket picking guys up at the airport.
A lot. And they might have to do it in waves, because between college and the pros, gonna be a lot of visitors, and this team's gonna look very, very different by the time we hit true off-season work, organized team activities.
We got some comments already off the top. Why are you late? It's EJ. We had a challenge flag. See how many people misremember things. Not me. It's a lock. It's a steel trap. Nothing gets by this thing. Clearly, I've never forgotten anything.
Okay. Clearly.
Yes, it's live. And then
Bellissimo.
Good to see you, EJ. He's not EJ and JB, not EJ and Jeff.
It's true.
Windy City guys. No. Just EJ.
I went on, to be fair, if you're a Letterkenny fan, to be fair, I did go on a show. So,
well, okay. That's fine. Now you're just rubbing salt in the wound. Never asked me to be on his show, and it's not good to see me. So
I think it's good to see you, and I truly appreciate the faded blue and orange sort of flannel. That it's seasonal, it's appropriate. I'm loving it.
I'm just getting killed on my own show. We just got, you know what? I'll just take myself out and
Why don't you,
we'll just do the EJ. We'll just do an EJ hour and I'll drink off screen. How's that?
I think you should drink on screen because it would be way more entertaining.
And not just say, I'll just mute myself.
Yeah, a lot of the faces
people might like that. It might actually up our listenership. So
I think what's going to up the listenership is we're now to the point where the things we get to talk about are like crazy hopeful. And that's not where we've been for the last 10, 12, even 16 weeks. So it's a big change. It's literally going from dark to light or whatever analogy you want to use. This is a massive change and like it's go time. Like the hammer is down and those agents are, regardless of what the NFL says, those agents are already negotiating. Ryan Pohl's phone is ringing off the hook with theoretically, if my client wanted to come to Chicago, what would that look like?
Oh yeah, a lot of hypothetical conversations start.
Absolutely, a lot of steak dinners occurring. Like all that stuff is going on right now, and the end result of that through the middle of this summer is going to be fascinating to see how that all plays out, because there's a lot to do. Like I was trying to think of a parallel. I was trying to think of another team that has that clear of a deck, i.e. a roster that's that depleted, that much cap space, and that many draft picks in one shot. And I can't think of another team that sort of mirrors that situation that has all three of those things.
Yeah. All right. Well, already a lot of activity. A lot of people like the happy hour.
Who doesn't like happy hour?
Who doesn't like happy hour? Drinks are cheaper at home too. You can go to happy hour. Happy hour prices. I feel like I'm getting old. Because happy hour prices are now like what drinks used to cost regular prices, like I don't know, 5 years ago.
Pretty soon we're gonna have old man Jeff yells at cloud.
We're not that far off.
No,
we're not that far off.
No, we are not.
Okay, so let's get a writing utensil.
Oh, somebody said EJ needs a diver down. EJ does need a diver down. EJ is out of Bacardi Limon because it's wintertime, and I don't typically drink them in wintertime. It is a very seasonal drink for me. I love them during the summer, even spring, a little bit fall, but I pretty much, I ran my little bottle of Limon out because it's just using it one shot at a time, and I don't have any Pacifico either, so no diver downs today. Kind of a bummer. I do have some winter beers upstairs. I might go grab one of those at one point, but no diver downs for me.
There was a tweet out there that said that coffee helps offset the impacts on your liver from alcohol. And I tagged you and I said, doesn't that clearly say that the Irish coffee is the perfect drink? It's just,
it's not just for breakfast anymore.
No, I mean, it's perfect. It offsets.
It's like you as a scientist would appreciate it because it's like a chemical equation. It's perfect balance.
That's exactly right. Yeah. Perfectly balanced.
No waste on either side of the equation.
Yeah, you're just good. You can just drink those all day. You'll be fine. No problems. Okay. We're going to do a podcast. Keep the comments coming. We'll come back at the end. We'll do some Q&A. And then I will get out of here and get some dinner. And EJ will go get some Bacardi Limon or something. So
maybe.
All right. Let's do this thing. Welcome to Bears Over Beers. I'm Jeff Berckes, a writer for Windy City Gridiron, and I'm joined, as always, by EJ Snyder. EJ, the 2022 Chicago Bears season is over with a record of 3-14 and the number 1 pick in the 2023 draft. Very exciting stuff. How are you doing tonight?
I'm good. I want to throw a shout out and a thank you to Lovie Smith, who gave the Texans a good solid kick on the way out the door and said,
"Build them that trophy."
I'm not losing the game, which in turn means his former team gets the number 1 pick overall. So some poetic justice there. I'm good. There's a lot to focus on. Not only for the Bears, preeminently here for the Bears. And again, the Bears are going to be the focal point of I would say both major offseason activities, the draft and free agency. So we haven't seen that in a while. We certainly have seen a few Bears teams that had a lot of money to spend or a fairly high draft pick, but we have not seen both in the same year, where the Bears have the highest draft pick and the most cap availability in free agency to spend. So it's unprecedented. It's going to be super fun to watch. And we're going to know a lot more about Ryan Poles and what he really wants to do by the end of this, because now he is out of sort of restriction land, right? He has ripped the restrictor plate off the engine, and he has unlimited resource and a pretty clean slate of a roster. I'm not sure how many Bears are under contract for next year, but it's extremely low. It's like 18.
Yeah. So you're saying you weren't around in 1947, the last time the Bears had the number 1 pick?
Despite this well-worn visage, not even close.
Your kids told me that you were ancient, that you were older than dust when I saw them.
That's
So,
right. If you pushed them, my kids would tell you I rode dinosaurs to school, but as a scientist, that's not true.
Well, there is a little bit of a gap in, millions of years and all that kind of stuff. Well, whatever, that's fine. They'll eventually get there. I don't know what the public school systems are like in your area, but eventually they'll probably teach that. So let's get into the drinks before we get too much further on, because it's happy hour. We are recording this live on Second City Gridiron YouTube. And we decided to go a little early. Normally we go a little later, but we're going a little early during the happy hour time in the central time zone. I don't know what it is out there. It's like afternoon for you, but
barely after lunch.
I decided to bring on my bottle because this
nice.
is the year that I will remember that EJ introduced me to Burrell, the seagrass. And so this is what we had when I was out in Seattle and hanging out with you and did our live show together. And so I thought this would be a nice way to cap off the year and enjoy this with you. What do you got tonight?
I might go get a shot of the same thing because I was late to the program. I do not have a drink at my table side, and I was remiss earlier this week in removing the bottle of alcohol that I keep here in the recording studio for moments just like this, where I go, I have this because it just happened to be under the table. So my Burrell is upstairs, but I think that's very fitting. So I might go pour some over ice while you answer a couple of questions, because I too would like to celebrate. It was a fun year. We changed the program up a little bit this year. It was a challenging year. Certainly for you, your plate was extremely heavy in terms of load. And, it does feel like this is worthy of a celebration to say, whew, we're through that. It's going to change a lot. We're not exactly sure how, both for us and the Bears, and to say, before we do all that, like, we did some good stuff this year and it was a lot of fun. You and I got to see each other, physically in person this year, which is a rare occurrence and always a good time. So yeah, I think I might run upstairs and grab some seagrass and throw it over ice. So why don't you
do that? And I will set up our big off-season project that we're going to be
embarking
on. So go ahead and make your run here, and I will go ahead and do that. So one of the things that we're excited about here on Second City Gridiron YouTube is that we're going to be doing a draft show very regularly. And so we're going to be working with Robert Schmitz, Jacob Infante, Quentin Christo, who is not a Windy City guy, but he's sort of adopted into our family here. We're really excited about working with him. Danny Meehan, who's done some work on the channel, and then Brandon Robinson. And those 5 gentlemen are going to be hitting. They already are hitting a lot of tape, and they're developing draft reports. A lot of people are familiar with Jacob's work, and he puts a lot of that on the site. What we're aiming to do is create a lot of content on this channel that will be hopefully pretty accessible. I think that there's a little bit of mystery that separates a lot of the fan base from the draft process and the draft evaluations and some of these terms that are used. We're going to try to demystify that a little bit, and we're going to try to make things a little bit more accessible. There are a lot of players. Jacob's going to look at film for basically every draft eligible player. He's going down into Division II players. For him, this is his bailiwick. He's going to go out and he's going to try to see everybody. The other guys are going to be a little bit more focused. They're going to be taking one position group or 2 position groups and doing a little deeper dives. And so we'll have individuals doing different aspects of this project. we will have a lot of what we're calling building the board is the project, but we'll have a lot of building the position groups at first. So we'll focus in on specifically say, offensive line, maybe even center prospects, and we will stack those players by their position first. So we will have a pretty good idea by position group what we think are the better players available in this draft. We'll have conversations about that. Maybe we'll have some fun little back and forth. We'd like to try to have a lot of audience participation, where maybe you guys can help us pick the next topic, or you'd like to see a little bit of a deeper dive on a certain player. We'd be willing to do stuff like that. We have 5 guys working on this project, and then me kind of project managing it, which is great, but that still means there's limited ability and time to get to everything. So we can't deep dive into all, 400 prospects, but there will be some opportunities to take deeper dives into specific players that people really want to learn more about. We're really excited about that. We have, the ability to reach out and bring in different experts across the spectrum. We have the ability to cut up, highlights and to show what we're talking about, the strengths and weaknesses of players, and put out some specific clips for, individual players or individual position groups. A lot of this is we're going to just try to have fun, and we're going to try to figure out a lot of stuff along the way, but it's going to be Bears specific. Doesn't mean that if you're a Cowboys fan, or if you're a Patriots fan, that you can't get value out of it, because clearly they're the same pool of players, but it will have a Bears focus. So if a player doesn't necessarily fit in with the Bears scheme, or he'd be, stacked, the Bears roster isn't very deep, but if a player wouldn't even be competitive on that roster, maybe not a guy that we're going to spend a lot of time with, right? So we're going to be focused as if we were the Bears scouting department and the Bears decision makers, and try to craft the project around that. So it's a really exciting idea. And I'm sure EJ, you can pop in from time to time and maybe give some of your opinions as well. Obviously, you have your stuff going on at Bootleg, which I will kick it back to you to maybe talk about what your offseason plans are for Bootleg, and then we'll talk about the number 1 pick and get in the draft, because that's what this show is. We're just going to want to talk about the Bears, the number 1 pick, and what we think that can look like. So why don't you get into your offseason plans, and we'll kind of hit the number 1 pick.
Yeah, it transitions really quickly. In fact, it kind of already has. Like, draft season is underway today. I did my first draft focused interview this morning at 9 a.m. I got calls over the weekend like, "Hey, when are you starting? When's stuff coming out? When can we talk to you?" And it's like, we're just setting up the playoff preview. But it is this period of the NFL season that it's one of the things I understand a lot better over the last 2 to 3 years. I sort of never understood all the forces that come together on the college side and the pro side as they kind of collide right now over the next 5 to 6 weeks to sort of end the NFL season and kick off draft season. I was like, why can't they just wait? And now I fully understand, because there are a lot of other things in motion. So we already have our plan to go to Shrine Bowl. We will be there. Coaching staffs were announced today for that. Atlanta on one side, New England on the other. So that's pretty exciting. We've been getting rosters for about 2 weeks now from Eric Alco, the director there. Of course, Jim and his staff down in Mobile have been putting out Senior Bowl rosters as well. So we're looking over those. And really it just kicks into, okay, we don't want to skip all the playoff football, because playoff football is kind of NFL distilled down to what everybody's been waiting for: best teams playing best teams. So we're not going to skip that, but we shortened it up this week. We had 2 podcasts, one focusing on the AFC, one focusing on the NFC slates of the teams that are left. And we will keep it that way, probably right up until the Super Bowl show. Sounds like we will probably do our Super Bowl preview show from Vegas again, because we'll be recording that the Saturday after Shrine Bowl. So stay tuned for that, but really kicking it into just draft focused content right now. Bunch of traveling. We're going to try and go to a bunch of pro days this year, which we didn't do last year. That's an addition. And then just time right here in the dungeon with the tape on under the light, well, early or late, or however you look at that, and getting through what is a very large list of super talented players. It's a really cool class. But it's just sort of how I don't want to say I'm not lucky enough, because I'm incredibly lucky to do this. It's not, I don't have that clean break of like, okay, we're done with the NFL and now we get to do the draft. Like, it's both for the next 4 to 5 weeks pretty heavy until the Super Bowl's over, and then it can really focus up on draft. But yeah, lots of irons in the fire, lots of new things. Be doing a bunch of traveling. Might see some new sponsors, hopefully, for draft season, and just trying to make it work. Trying to get to know this class really well. Take as many opportunities as we can to talk to players and coaches themselves, because that's a newish thing for me last couple of years, and it really does add a layer of depth, I think, to understanding who they are and what they do well, and always cool to get those opportunities.
Yeah, it's kind of like an eclipse, right? Like these huge, planet of covering the entire league, and then this huge planet of trying to understand the incoming draft class and all the work and prep that goes into that. I think it's, I mean, I don't dive into the film at all. That's not my thing, but I can appreciate how much that takes, right? And so you're spending a couple hours per player. If you're just going to be talking about one position group, that even that is a pretty huge task, just try to nail down one position group, and then building off of that and trying to understand the whole class and how it all fits together. It takes months, and a lot of these guys, this is their full-time job, and that's all they do, right? They're not worried about what's happening on the NFL field. I just watched Hustle last night. It's not that good of a movie. Whatever, it's
Ah,
fine. It's
it's
fine.
fun. It's
Eh,
fun.
I'm not a big basketball fan. That's maybe part of
Okay.
it,
Okay.
but part of it was like he was a scout and he's running around the world trying, watching these guys.
Yeah.
You don't necessarily have to do that, but there are guys that are doing that, right? They're going to the games on Saturdays and they're in the
Mhm.
facilities. They're talking to coaches throughout the year. Those are those scouts that are on the ground, that are informing their teams of these guys and getting the early start. So you're playing catch up, and so what I think is interesting at this time is that people feel pretty strongly about some of the top prospects, and some of those guys will certainly stick around. Some of those guys will kind of move a little bit down once the testing starts or whatever. There's always going to be players that are going to, right now they're ranked 130th on these big boards, and then by the
Yeah.
time draft comes, they're first rounder, second rounder, right? So those things are kind of fun, once the NFL scout community catches up with everything, and the boards get updated and a consensus kind of comes through. But the Bears are in such a fun position because they were basically gifted the number one pick with that crazy finish with the Texans and Colts game. What an amazing finish from Lovie Smith, and good for him, like you said, to give the middle finger to that organization as he was on his way out to cost them the number one pick, maybe costing them, a divisional trade, right? The Colts may jump them to take the quarterback of their choice. So there's some real fun storylines that developed because of this. Obviously, the fun storyline being Lovie Smith, former Chicago Bears coach. I love the idea of like an art installation of Lovey's beard being put on like all of the statues around Chicago, right? Like put him on the Lions, put him on the Hallis,
Can
a
can we make
statue
a
at Old Soldier
beard
Field.
big enough for the bean? Is it
I
possible?
don't know. I don't see why not, right? I mean, if nothing
Okay.
else, we're just gonna have to Photoshop it in. We're gonna have to
Sure.
figure that out. So, but yeah, good for Lovey, and such a good guy, still beloved in Chicago. And I mean, I'm sure that he doesn't care that the Bears have the number one pick at all. It doesn't. That obviously didn't enter into his mind by any stretch of the imagination. But it's fun for us, and again, this city still has a lot of love for Lovey Smith. So, good for him. But Bears go into this season like we've talked about, most cap room in the league by a long shot, ton of
Yeah.
money to be able to spend, and then the number one pick, the number one overall pick. Now, I have said that it would be malpractice if Ryan Poles does not trade out of that pick to get more picks so that you can start to fill some of the holes. Now, it takes two, and trading is not easy. It isn't just like, hey, number one picks for sale, give me all your picks for it. There's a lot of nuance that goes into this. There's relationship building. This is his second year on the job. He's had calls with some of these other GMs for sure. There's other GMs that are motivated to get up to number one, we would think. But again, there has to be what's called a positive bargaining zone. I mean, I took a negotiations classes in grad school, and like I know this stuff from a very nerdy level. But basically, if there is an overlap in interest where the Bears can get enough capital where they feel like they're making themselves better by trading down, and another team is willing to give up enough capital because they think they're making their team better by trading up to acquire the player of their dreams with the number one overall pick, that's a positive bargaining zone, and they will be able to reach a deal. Are the Bears going to get this like unbelievable haul that is going to set them up forever? You know, these like these, was it the Herschel Walker trade, like the craziness, Williams, the running back with Mike Ditka, right?
Ricky.
Ricky Williams, right?
Yep.
These crazy trades that, you know, were just kind of outlandish. You know, we don't need to go to the outlier scenarios necessarily, but it is a very valuable pick. We would expect some level of pretty significant compensation in this draft and some compensation in future drafts. So it could be just 2024, like a future pick, but it also could even get into the 2025 draft because that capital is live. So there's a lot that could happen here, but my expectation is that Ryan Poles will find a deal and he will trade out of that number one pick at least once. I mean, everybody, you know, lesser, hey, maybe they trade twice. That's an even tougher thing to do, but I think at least one trade down and still put yourself in a position to take a good football player.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I would be very surprised. I think not the least likely scenario, but one of the least likely scenarios here is stick and pick. I don't think that will happen for a multitude of reasons. The price will be extremely high, and it's not because of a trade chart or value chart or anything else. The bottom line is you have the ultimate piece of leverage in the NFL draft. Nobody can trump you if you have the first pick. Nobody can jump you and take your player. So it is the ultimate piece. Therefore, you pay the ultimate price to get it. It is the most expensive pick in the draft by far, like exponentially. Even as you drop down to 2 and 3 and 4, if you look at any point value chart, 1 is worth a lot more than those picks because of the power and control. It is a unique position within the draft. There will be multiple teams that believe that a quarterback, and there are quarterbacks in this draft, can change the future of their franchise. And when you're talking about a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar business and changing the course of that for the next 8 to 10 years, 2 number one picks, 3 number one picks is not a lot to pay for that. It's a tremendous amount of draft capital. We just talked about that, the number one picks being pretty darn expensive, and rookie quarterbacks who would presumably be the starter at that point, if that much was paid for them, don't do so well. So again, the next pick, the next year, their first round pick is still going to be pretty valuable. That all being said, a couple of teams are going to want that presumptive guy to lead their team. A lot of people are talking about that being Bryce Young right now. We're not to that point. Yes, he's one of those guys that will be in consideration for that role. And if a couple of teams lock on, it's not about what they should pay. It's about what the other team will pay. And they won't be told that. They'll have to infer that, right? And so Ryan Poles can sit back and say, great, you don't want to give me your first round picks for the next 2 years plus a bunch of other picks? They will. And if they say, yeah, we'll give you the first round pick for the next couple of years, he's going to go right back to the other one and say, okay, give me your next first 3 first round picks. And that is the maximum. You cannot trade picks past the 3rd year of the draft. So they can't say 4 first round picks. Not possible. That pick is not up for sale for them. Is it likely because quarterbacks break the rationality scale for the draft and the number one pick teams there isn't another way to put it. They are desperate to change their franchise. And if they don't have a quarterback, it is the way to change their franchise. So they will pay whatever. Is it therefore likely that Ryan Poles comes away with 3 first round picks from a team that becomes enamored with, whether it's Bryce Young or another signal caller that they believe can change the course of their billion-dollar franchise? The answer is, yeah, that is not at all out of the realm of possibility. In fact, it's somewhat likely. I would pretty much expect it.
Yeah, and I think that we could maybe expect it before draft day, right? Like, I mean,
Yes.
this is live right now. So there's nothing that says that you can't make that trade anytime up until the draft. And so I would expect a move to be made sooner rather than later so that you can kind of reset the building and you can say, okay, now we have, for example, we have made a trade with Indianapolis. We now have
Mhm.
the 4th pick. So
Mhm.
let's now reset our board with the understanding that we may be on the clock at 4. Do we want to see if we want to trade down again, or do we want to try to see what we think is going to be available and, like you said, stick and pick and take a guy at that point? And so I would expect there to be movement before the draft, and so I think that in March you're going to start hearing things, and I could see a deal happening, as soon as, I don't know, St. Patrick's Day, right?
They'd wait a little bit later. They're gonna wait to see who comes out of the weeds. And as we all know about draft cycle, it changes, just like you said at the top of this, a lot as we go on. People move up, people move down, opinions change. Um, Consensus swells, if you will, about certain players. People become more sure that X is a sure thing. They're going to wait for all that to play out, and they're going to wait for any potential suitors to come out of the woodwork and go, "Hey, we weren't in the market before, but we've traded our starting quarterback, who everybody presumed was going to be our leader. So now we're a new player in the market, and maybe we have a good pick or a better pick or a better package of picks." So the Bears will wait to play that hand. They're not going to play it early and then go, "Oh, we could have gotten more." They'll wait probably right up until, at I would say at the earliest, a few 4 or 5 days before the draft to really pull the trigger and finalize that. They might wait a little bit later, but it will be done before the draft because it is the top pick. I think we will go into this draft knowing that the top pick no longer belongs to the Bears. It now belongs to Team X, and the Bears are picking at and have X load of capital to work with, both in this draft, like you said, and in future years. But a bunch of it will be in this draft. It won't just be a one in this draft. It will be a 1 and a 2 or a 1 and a 3 in this draft, plus maybe another pick or possibly even a player, but that's a little bit less likely.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of fun player scenarios, right? Again, with the Colts, there was a lot of fun stuff that was happening, and our friend Brad Spielberger sort of took that to the next level, where the Colts got to, they offered in trade in this very funny hypothetical trade Peyton Manning's passing records, which someone astutely pointed out that the Bears will finally get a 4,000-yard passer after that trade goes down, with the Manning passing records, and the Chris Ballard's firstborn and all that kind of, like they're
Yeah.
asking. Bears fans are going to get a little out of hand, but it's not impossible that there would be some veteran players that would come along with this, because at some point some of these players are actually it makes sense to send to the Bears, because again, the Bears have all the money. So if the Bears are able to take on, say, they can take on DeAndre Hopkins contract and maybe an extension, they could take on a DeForest Buckner, right? Like they could take on some of these like high level veteran players that are, could really anchor position groups,
Mhm.
and so that makes things pretty interesting as well. Not that the Cardinals aren't interested in trading up, but the Colts would certainly be, and then obviously Eddie Eberflus would have probably some motivation to reunite with DeForest Buckner. So I'm not going to kill the Buckner talk. I think that's at least live. That could happen here. But
Sure.
it is interesting stuff, and the scenarios are probably going to drive some people crazy. Take them with a grain of salt. They're gonna, just okay. It's all just kind of fun. If it seems outlandish, then it probably is outlandish. But there will be some significant compensation. Um, the point that I want to make is that the trading down doesn't necessarily have to stop there, right?
Yeah.
It does. If you trade to 4, you can trade out of 4. That's fine. But you could trade. Let's say you had, again, let's just use the Colts for an example, and they send their first and their second round pick of this year, and you stick at 4. You could trade down in the second round pick, and you could
Mhm.
generate a little more capital for that draft. So there's a lot of things that Ryan Poles can do if he has a few more picks, and then if you have a first round pick into next year's draft or beyond, those picks can then be traded down for additional capital, particularly if in future years you feel like you're pretty well set up at some of the positions of need at some of the higher position groups. You can do that, or you can package up some of those and move in for an impact player at one of those key positions. So getting more of those pieces is important for this rebuild, where you have stripped down the roster, you've stripped down all of the economic factors that Ryan Pace left behind. Ryan Poles has done a very nice job of excising all of that off of the books, And now you have an opportunity to rebuild with new contracts, with new players. That also means that everything is going to be in his image, right? Like this is now, you can't really blame anything from here on out. And I would expect some pretty quick results in terms of making this team competitive next year through this, but it can't just be about this draft and this offseason. He has an opportunity to set himself up for the next 2 or 3 drafts to really set up the Bears, give themselves depth and impact players for the next 5-6 years.
Yeah, they have a lot of opportunity, and one of the things that the number one pick is super flashy, and it's a little bit like Crow syndrome, right? Ooh, shiny. Everybody wants to focus on that number one pick, and rightfully so. It is the like we said, the premier spot in the NFL draft. What that also means is the Bears have the top pick in most of the other rounds because they do have a full slate of picks this year. So they're not only going to get the top pick in the first, they're going to get the top pick in the second and the top pick in the third.
Well, they're not going to get the top pick in the second.
True, because they traded away their second, which was
They do have a second. It would be Baltimore second.
Right. So they're going to have multiple opportunities at the top of each round, and there are 3 resets if you want to in the NFL draft before day 1, and the first round goes off on the first day. The next night is rounds 2 and 3, and there is a reset. There is going to be a reset for that pick that is currently owned for Claypool, because again, it's, hey, we've got 32 players off the board, or in this case 31, because Miami has forfeited their pick. Who do you want to come up? Again, of all the players that are left, do you want the right to pick first? So it's almost like a mini first round pick at the top of the second round. That will happen again. Would have been for the Bears, but they traded that pick away. It will happen again when you open the last day. Hey, we have a player now in the 4th round who everybody thought was going to be there in the second. Are there a few teams? And we always see that little flurry on the beginning of Saturday morning of like, hey, the best of what's available, right? Do you want to trade down 5 or 10 spots, pick up an additional pick or 2 because, hey, you're leading off the now 4th round and there's a guy that nobody thought was going to be available and we're going to stop his slide. Some team's going to say, no, we think, for a 4th round pick, that's a huge value. And we don't care if we give you a 5th or a 6th, like, or both, like, let's go do it. So there's going to be multiple stages or steps throughout this draft where the Bears are presented with the opportunity to say, hey, do you want to leverage that value? And for a team like the Bears that has multiple needs, isn't a player or 2 players or even 3 players away to say, sure, you're going to give us something this year? Cool. You're going to give us something next year? Cool. We need it all. Like, that's great. And as long as there's not one of those sort of Bears stamped players on their board that they might be letting go, or there's another one that they might be able to get in 10 or 15 picks, they're probably going to say yes.
Yeah, a little advice for Ryan Poles. Pick up one of those little chargers so that you can keep your phone on full, because
I think they're going to go old school and hardwire it. It's going to be plugged into the wall.
Burning batteries. I mean, his ear is probably going to hurt by the end of the night, because he's going to, every night like this guy's going to have 18-hour work days, right? He's going to barely sleep because he's going to be running the draft. Like this. I'm telling you, I said it on Bear and Balance. I gave Ryan Poles a hot bowl of porridge, which means like good, right? And I mean that in the sense of we're now done. Like we have gotten through this crap. We can forgive all this. And now when you look at it and you look back at what happened, he kind of did exactly what he wanted to. He got rid of all the contracts. He got some draft capital for some players that he didn't want on this roster moving forward. Say what you want about Roquan Smith. We can talk about that contract that Baltimore gave him later, but he clearly decided when contract negotiations broke off in camp that this guy was not a future part of this team, and he was able to get significant draft capital for Roquan Smith. You can argue that wasn't enough, but to me, it was significant draft capital, and he doesn't have to pay him, so that there's money open for him to reallocate to position groups that he might find more valuable. And you have, I think in my opinion, you feel good about Justin Fields moving forward. Some people aren't convinced, but whatever. I think he's convinced that he feels good about Justin Fields moving forward, and then he has all the cap money, and he owns the first pick in the draft. So this is perfect. This is a perfect scenario for Ryan Poles to go into this offseason. He runs this offseason.
Yeah, he can do again. He can go where he wants to go. There's nowhere he can't sort of drive for all those people out there that go, "Oh, the Bears don't spend money." Quite frankly, it's not up to the Bears. The amount of money that the Bears have to spend is negotiated by the CBA. So the amount of money that they can spend, the cap, which is the number that everybody focuses on, is negotiated by the CBA, but so is the floor. There is a minimum amount that the Bears have to spend in free agency, and they don't have a choice. They can't put in a little card that says, "Oh, we're saving that for next year." No, there is a minimum amount as a percentage that they have to spend of that money this year. They have to by rule. So the whole like, "Oh, the Bears are cheap." If you take the floor number, it is far greater than many teams' full cap number this year. And the Bears have to spend all that. So the whole like Bears are cheap thing is going to go out the window. They have to spend tens of millions of dollars this year, and they will, um, improving this team. And that means a lot of contracts, a lot of big contracts. You're going to see some, uh, position resetting contracts. We saw the Christian Kirk contract to the Jaguars last year that all general managers were upset about because it set off this chain reaction of wide receiver movement throughout the league because everybody went, well, if Christian Kirk's getting that, what am I worth? You're going to see a couple of those from the Bears because they're basically going to have to, right? They're not going to sign 50 guys. They're going to sign, 20 guys maybe. And if you look at 20 guys and the tens of millions of dollars they have to spend, there's going to be some big contracts in there.
Yeah, I said in my 10 thoughts article this week, but you know, it's a little annoying. Sometimes I'll say the word annoying, but it is what it is. Like every time someone says, "Hey, this player is available in trade," or "Hey, this player just got cut," and inevitably there's like, "Well, the Bears should sign him, right?" And it's so many times it's like, guys, like just no, that doesn't fit. So now the answer is yes. The answer is they should look into it, right? Like every
Yeah.
good player that doesn't play quarterback, like it really is live for this team right now. There's just not, maybe you can make the case that they're set at safety, right? They've got two good safeties that they like. I don't think they're getting rid of Eddie Jackson, and I think they certainly should like what Jaquan Brisker showed them. But corner, yeah, they need another corner, right? Linebacker, sure, they could use another one of those. Defensive lineman, they need like 8 of those. Let's go, right? Offensive line, yeah, they need to rebuild that. Wide receiver, yes, that's not done being built. Running back, Dave Montgomery's a free agent. You need to add to that room. Like tight end, yeah, absolutely. You need another one with Cole Kmet. Like every single position group needs something here. Probably don't need a punter. I think we're good with the guillotine. But other than that, like everything's live. So the answer is yes. If it's a good player and he's hitting free agency or he's being made available in trade, like this DeAndre Hopkins talk, and I've mentioned it twice already because he's one of my favorite players, and I will not be rational around DeAndre Hopkins. If he comes, I'm not even going to look at the price tag of what it costs or what. I'm not going to be rational. You can't ask me that question because when one of your favorite players comes and gets to play and put on navy and orange, I'm not rational anymore. This is what happened with Khalil Mack. You
Mhm.
couldn't ask me to be rational about the Khalil Mack trade because I loved the player when he played for the Raiders.
Yeah,
So,
no, it's out there, and you're right. I got asked a really good question in that interview this morning. I love good questions. One of my favorite things about doing interviews is when you get asked a really, really good question. They're like, "Where should we not concentrate? Like, where should the Bears not be looking?" And my answer is outside of quarterback. And possibly if you just want to group together secondary, but you're right. They need a good nickel. They could use another outside corner. They could use a third safety. There's a lot of looks in the NFL where you play a third safety. And so third safety is kind of creeping into what nickel used to be as like, well, are they a starter? Nickel's been a starter for the last 3 or 4 years based on usage. Third safety in a lot of defenses is bordering on starter territory. So but yeah, like you said, defensive line, they don't have a lot there. They have a lot of guys that can help, but they don't have the people that they can set their stake of who they want to be. So there's tons and tons of need all across this team, multiple positions within each position group in several cases. But then there's this, what do they want to be? And the second question, the follow-up question in that interview is, do you think they know what they want to be? And my answer is, I don't know, but I hope so. And we're going to find out because make no mistake, the Bears did what they did this year because they had to. There were multiple reasons that forced them into these decisions, and they decided the best way to navigate what they'd been given was to do what they did. Slash and burn, get everybody off the books, get a minimum number of players at a minimum number of contracts, get through the season, highlight that Justin had enough ability, not just physical ability, but football playing ability to be the guy to solidify that notion. And they did that. They recreated an offense just to do that. They did that. And they just had to get through this year. They did it because they had to. This is not the ideal of what Ryan Poles or Matt Eberflus or Luke Getsy wants the Bears to look like. So now we've talked about that being the past. The gates are open. The table is clear. There's stacks of money on it. What do you want to be? You better have a really good idea because, like you said, all these opportunities come up. They come up in the draft. They come up in free agency. And people go, should we go after that guy? He's flashy. He's cool. And it's like, great. Well, what do you want to be? Right? Do you want to be a power running team? Do you want to mold yourself after the Carolina Panthers and beat the hell out of people? If you do, little spindly wide receivers that don't block don't really fit your thing. They might be a great wide receiver, but maybe not in your system. So you do need that fit of what does a player do well? And is that what we need? And the idea of, is that what we need for the Bears is evolving, and it will change. It will not be what you saw in 2022. It will be something different. And the question was, do they know what that is? And my answer is, I hope so. I hope they have a really good plan on a big whiteboard somewhere that says, when we have our chance to make this, to mold this, to build this, to buy this, these are the things we want the most because this is what we want to be.
I hope you're right. We're gonna find out, and it's gonna be
Yes, we
fun,
are.
right? We can
Yes, we
make
are.
our assumptions, and we can make our, this is what I would do, right? And those
Yep.
those things are fun to do. I in a kind of a, mind meld with somebody out there in the universe. I say, okay, you took the secondary players because it usually takes a year for them to come up and learn and get,
Mm.
and so my next year, those guys are going to be in a really good position. I mean, I think Brisker played pretty well as a rookie, but Gordon came on late. You
Mhm.
see that progression year two. You hope you get a lot out of him. Now all of a sudden you have a secondary that can really compete, and you add in some defensive linemen. Those guys usually hit the ground running a little faster, either through the draft or you add in the free agency. Now all of a sudden, maybe your defense can become competent, right? Like, so in that side of the ball, I can kind of see the picture. On the offense, I don't know. Like, I mean, they got a lot of work to do.
A
They
lot.
have they have to figure a lot of things out. So let's take a quick break, and then on the other side of this, I want to talk about just big picture of what this draft looks like so far as you get started. All right, EJ, let's talk about the 2023 NFL draft. So, for those of you listening, the 2023 NFL draft will take place starting on Thursday, April 27th. So, you will hear nonstop from Bears stuff about the NFL draft until then. So, if you're not a draft person, just want to like wake up when you get the draft class. Yeah, plug your ears, right? End of April is when this happens. Now, I will mention that they have started moving the draft around. It used to always be in New York. They used to be the thing, and they started moving the draft around. This year's in Kansas City, and Kansas City is very close to where I live. That is within a very short drive. And of course, Kansas City, they do this thing called barbecue quite well.
Yes.
And I enjoy barbecue a lot, immensely. And so I think that I'm going to come down and see my friend EJ, and my friend that I've never met, Brett,
Yep.
and maybe some other people during the draft. So that's something to look forward to, as well as that there's opportunities for those of you that live in the Midwest to maybe attend one of these drafts.
Mm.
But if not, like we'll be there in person to take all of this in. So that's kind of the big picture of what we're all heading toward is the late April draft starting on Thursday night with the first round. But from a big picture perspective, what is sticking out from you right now? You haven't done all the player
Mhm.
evaluations, anything like that, but what are some of the themes that you early on in the process see emerging?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it's the draft continuum is a slider. We start really just a few days after the last draft ends. I mean, I started the sheet I'm looking at right now about 5 to 6 days after last year's draft ended. I take a bit of a breather, and then you start building what's, who didn't come out, who is coming out. And that process is still ongoing. Not everybody's declared. Certainly not all the underclassmen have declared. Not even all the what we'd call upperclassmen have declared. We just saw today that Spencer Rattler is going back to South Carolina. We thought he was going to be in this draft class, in the quarterback class. So the just need to say that these sort of grades are incomplete, right? When you didn't do all your work in school and they gave you the old INC, need to do a little bit more. All of this stuff is early and incomplete. We haven't seen the full class solidified. People will leave and go back to school. People will add their name into the hat to come out that we maybe didn't expect. Some people will get injured and change their minds. So things are fluctuating. But what we see right now is a really talented class, which is awesome. That makes it a lot of fun for folks like me that spend a lot of time doing this. And, the Bears have a lot of needs. We talked about that earlier. So it's a little bit easier to say the draft lines up with their needs because they have needs everywhere. But some of their strongest needs or their biggest needs, like defensive line, there are some very talented defensive linemen, and both interior and what we would call exterior or edge rush talent in this draft. The Bears need both. And there are talented players at all, officially 3 or 4 of those spots, depending on how you slice it. A lot of strength there, and a lot of names you've heard and a lot of names you will hear, especially attached to the Bears, because they're going to be high picks, and they're very talented. They've both been in the spotlight. Certainly the top edge rusher and the top defensive tackle have been in the spotlight since last year when people were talking about how good they were and they weren't eligible for the draft. That's Jalen Carter as the interior defensive lineman from Georgia, and Will Anderson, the edge rusher from Alabama, who, if he had been eligible to come out last year, may have been the top overall pick in the draft. So those guys are going to sort of lead that class. Some other areas there, it is a stronger quarterback class. Last year was a bit of a down year for the quarterbacks. This year, not so. There's a lot of talent, and you will see it spread throughout the first, 1 to 3-ish rounds. A lot of arms that people have a lot of hopes that they can lift franchises. A lot to look at there, which is really cool after last year. Tight end is extremely strong. This is one of the strongest overall tight end classes we've seen, and there are some legitimate freaks in this class. Really big guys that can move and catch. Some guys that will make you flat out giggle. Where you just look at him and you go, what is that? How did he end up playing tight end? That's a lot of fun. The running back class, I know a lot of people don't want to talk about that. Certainly not up high, is very strong. There are some great running backs in this class as well. Wide receiver has some real strength at the top. That's, again, good news for the Bears. They need, if they don't go out and get a Nuke Hopkins to be their alpha, they're going to be looking for that player. Those players are here. And lots of other flavors down throughout the board as well. Really talented guys that can contribute to an NFL passing game. Again, once the Bears decide what that game is going to be for them, those types are going to be available. It's a good, strong, deep wide receiver class for the 3rd year in a row. Offensive line, there's some good players. I wouldn't say it's extremely strong. We had a really strong tackle class a couple of years ago. It doesn't look quite like that. Interior offensive line looks pretty good. Bears, again, need help there. And there are definitely some highlighted players that are, will be targets and will be linked to the Bears, not only because of positional need, but where they played. One of the top tackles is from Northwestern. One of the top centers is from Minnesota. There's guys at Notre Dame, as there always are on the offensive line. So you'll see these connections be made for players to the Bears. And you will hear the name Mustipher again.
The Penn State Mustipher.
Yeah, the Penn State Mustipher. Sam's little brother's in this draft. He's a defensive lineman for Penn State. So you will hear Mustipher again, and it is not Sam, it's his little brother. So
I only know that because one of the Mustipher relatives came at me pretty hard in the offseason about something I said about Sam. So
that's right. So now you're being very careful about the brother.
I mean, I'm fine if they want to keep coming at me, but maybe just don't accuse me of saying something I didn't say. But anyway, that being said, yes,
that being not said,
I mean, I've been pretty clear in what I feel about Sam Mustipher, and I have been trying to replace him for multiple years here. But I wasn't there. There was a very weird comment about how because he went to Notre Dame, that means that he's a better player than another center who didn't go to as good of a college. And I was like, that's not how it works, man.
It's not how it works, man.
Saw a Facebook comment today, which, as Lester says, if it comes from Facebook, it's usually pretty bad. But something, it was almost like if you thought the worst possible comment could be made, and then
Go to
you
Facebook
one
and
up
check
it,
your work.
and it was I just watched the national championship game, and I believe that the Bears should move Justin Fields to running back and draft Stetson Bennett with the number 1 overall pick. I didn't know that a take could be that bad, but here we are.
Yeah, here we are. There are a lot of misnomers about draft season. You're about to see them all. Welcome to the world. This is the season. It is great and terrible and many things in between. I've already started to see it. I put out a comment about Spencer Rattler going back to South Carolina, and I said, if you ever didn't think NIL wasn't going to matter, and immediately people didn't read that comment as, hey, that guy can go make some money off his talent now, so he doesn't have to go to the next level immediately or maybe even before he's ready. They said, what if he's just trying to better his draft stock? And I was like, yes, and he probably is trying to better his draft stock, but now he can afford to do that. He can go back and not lose nearly as much money, possibly, if he was going to be drafted later, like he was last year before he transferred to South Carolina. He still would have probably had to go for the money 5 years ago when he couldn't be paid for his talents in college. Now he can be, and he can go back and say, hey, I really like South Carolina. I like my fit. I like what I was able to accomplish. I think I could do even better. And yes, get drafted higher, but I also get money. It's not at a loss. I don't have to gamble that. And if I get hurt in the second game of the year and blow my knee up, now I've lost everything. Like, no, yes. And like, it's not a shot at Spencer Rattler. I'm glad he can get paid and make the best choice for him now with a much more even money differential. That just makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just money to go buy a fancy car either, right? Like a lot of these players are taking some of that money and they're able to buy an insurance policy take an insurance policy out on themselves so that if they do get hurt in that final year and that costs them draft position, they can recoup some of that money that they would have had, right? Like there are things like that happen as well. And of course, yeah, they're probably buying a fancy car and being a
the funny thing about
19-year-old making bad decisions, but
and that buying is that they're not. They have fancy cars.
Yeah.
They're not buying fancy
Well, if
cars.
they're getting money, that can be exchanged for goods and services. That's how I understand the economy working. So they can use that for how they wish. But
they can also get stuff as
they can also just get stuff. Yes.
Which in Spencer Rattler's case, he has a thing with Mopar. They have a Spencer Rattler edition, like Challenger or Charger.
Of course.
Of course. So he gets a car plus the money, and Quinn Ewers drives a Lamborghini, has an NIL deal with Lamborghini of Austin.
Sure.
Famously got his car towed during the second or third week of Texas's season because he parked it outside DKR and some campus cop towed it. I'm like, if you see a Lamborghini at DKR, it's either NFL player that came from the Longhorns and is back for the game, or your starting quarterback's car, maybe your coach's car. Don't tow it.
Don't tow that.
Just don't tow it.
Did you see the kid that was the meme with the Popeyes where he's kind of looking
and he's getting an
NIL deal with Popeyes?
I
he's
love
an offensive line. And of course, he grew up to be an offensive lineman, right?
And he looks the same. That's the crazy thing. He's got that look in his eye, which is the famous piece of the meme. I'm like, what are you doing? He looks the same in his college football photo, which is awesome. Loved it. Love NIL.
I think that Lester and I need to talk about that a little more because that's kind of an offensive lineman's dream, right?
It's kind of a perfect circle.
Yeah, that's amazing. I wonder what Lester's NIL deal would be. That's the question.
Zima, of course.
Well, maybe not
Zima.
At that point, but yes, Zima. Now it would be Zima. His NIL deal would be Zima.
Yes.
Get him to bring it back.
Yeah, I'm bringing
a
it
special
back.
brewed edition of Zima for Lester.
That's
So,
right.
all right. Well, that's kind of the show. That's the big picture of what we wanted to talk about. We don't know enough yet because it takes time. Like you
A
said,
lot.
you started a little bit last year. You catch some things here and there. You can get the big themes, but to really dive in deep and stack the position groups and build your big board and all that stuff takes time. And that it's fun and interesting if you're into that. We're gonna try on this channel to try to demystify some of that, as I talked about at the top of the show. But stick with us on Second City. Head on over to Bootleg and consume some of EJ's content over there with Brett Coleman. Of course, they go deep into the draft as well. Between those two shows, I don't think you need to go anywhere else. But if you want, there's other draft people out there. But this will give
Couple.
you a league perspective, and we'll give you the very specific Bears perspective. And I think between those two sources, you'll have that. And of course, you can ask us questions along the way, and we will try to gauge your interest in what you want to hear more about as we move along. So we will end season 4 of Bears Over Beers here. And I just want to thank all of you for hanging out with us throughout the year. Again, we changed focus this year. It got very difficult at the end because the Bears put nothing fun on tape the last couple of weeks. But throughout the year, we got to deep dive into a lot of players that we think will probably be contributors into the future, some that maybe won't be. But we got an opportunity to really focus in on one player a week and sometimes 2 players a week and take a little bit of a different look. And so thanks for coming along for that ride. And thanks for supporting us. And I don't know, man, enjoy your off season. Go do something other than football. And then, yeah, if that's a thing, right?
Yeah. Like, whew.
And then, gear up, man, because it's going to be a fun 2023. This team is going to be fun next year. And that's my prediction.
Yeah. There's going to be, there were a lot of storylines this year, and the storylines really focused around change. And that change was taking things that were negative and trying to make them neutral, right? Trying to erase financial hits, trying to erase players that weren't going to contribute down the road. So next year, that focus is really going to shift from we're at neutral to we want to make it cool.
Let's make it cool. That's a great way to end it.
Make it cool.
All right, guys. Thank you so much. Until next time, bear down. All right. So, by the way, 65. This is my 65th live stream since the start of the year.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
That's a lot. We were talking about, we opened one of the 2 shows, I think actually the one that just came out like an hour ago, this week. And, how are you? And how are you? Brett's answer was, man, I'm tired. I'm ready for the season to not be doing this anymore, but we've got another 5 weeks until it becomes again a different singular focus, and not at all asleep till February at this point. Like, yeah, Bearless Mode nailed it. There is no off season. This is sort of double season. We do want to pay attention to the playoffs. It is cool. We like it as much as every other fan likes it, but at the same time, draft season is officially on. The rosters are out there. The Hula Bowl's going on right now. CGS All-Star Game was last week. Our good buddy Emery Hunt is at both of those. This is a month for him, and by a month I really mean like 7 weeks. Shrine and Senior are really the end of his sort of on the road scouting bit before he goes home and puts out one of the most comprehensive guides out there. But he's already out there. He's already traveling. He's been on the road for 2 weeks at this point. He's going to be on the road for another 3 weeks. And, everybody else is like, oh yeah, think about the draft in a couple of months. Like, no, for those of us that do it a lot, it is officially on. We have transitioned.
Yeah, you have to. I mean, otherwise you're just not going to have the time.
You look at the numbers. I try not to look at the numbers, but you look at just the numbers on a spreadsheet, right? The numbers of players. And then you look at the days before you're going to go see them in Vegas. And you're like, well, sorry, boys, not going to get a deep dive on all of you because there's 125 of you and there are 20-ish days before we go. Not that I haven't seen many of these players before, but it's like, we're going to be watching the top, and then we go and get to be surprised. And that's cool. Right. We did it last year. Tyquan Thornton, I'm like, who's this kid? Like, I've seen him before. He's flashy, but he ends up being a contributor to the Patriots. And Isaiah Pacheco was a Shrine Bowl guy. And, it was like, who's this kid from Rutgers? And, he ends up being the starting running back for the Kansas City Chiefs, who are one of the favorites in the AFC. It happens that way. And it's surprising and it's cool and it's fun. And we're going to do the best we can to sort of pick out those storylines a little bit earlier and bring those guys to you as we see them and go, man, this guy feels like a dude. Like my biggest regret from last year is probably Cordell Volson. Like Cordell Volson, North Dakota State lineman who is starting for the Bengals again, one of the favorites in the AFC. He's just that guy. You just looked at him and you're like, dude, that guy's going to be a starter. He's going to end up as a starter at some team in the league. Like, and it's going to be maybe 2 years from now, because it'll be, turned out it was sooner, but it's going to be guard or it's going to be tackle. It doesn't matter. That guy's going to be a starter on a line in the league. We're going to look back and say, yeah, we knew that. And we should have sat down with him and said, hey, talked about his journey and whatever else. Again, we didn't think it happened quite this quickly, or not necessarily for a team that's as high profile right now as the Bengals are. Certainly they've had their issues with offensive line, but here's Cordell Volson going in the playoffs, starting role in front of Joe Burrow. And we could have sat him down across the table and said, we both kind of knew it. We just didn't trust our gut and go do it. Hopefully trust our gut a little bit more this year and just go, no, this guy's a dude. We gotta talk to him.
I love it. By the way, I need somebody to need me to go cover the Hula Bowl for them.
Yeah,
that's a new goal.
A little bit
is you're like, Jeff, we need you out the Hula Bowl. That's it. You need you there like a week in advance. And we need you there kind of wrapping up, like just the whole process. We need you there for it. The Roquan deal, I'm glad the Ravens signed it.
Yes.
I didn't want the Bears to do it. So I'm just being honest. I didn't want to put the money there. I'd rather put it in the lines. I don't want to, I have no idea what's going on in Roquan's mind or anything like that. I don't want to make it about that. There's enough around the periphery of Roquan Smith where you say, that guy is pretty close to making a pretty serious mistake off the field that's going to cost him on the field. And I don't know. It was just fine with me. Positional value, you got something out of it. You don't have to sign the big contract. And I don't know, man. Like there's just enough going on in the other stuff that I'm like, yeah, I'm okay with this.
So here's the deal. Here's the Roquan deal in a nutshell. Bears didn't want to pay it. That's fine. They move him for capital. That's great. He goes to a team that does want to pay him, loves his skill set, and is willing to invest heavily in that position. Those are all good things. Like, they're all good things. Independently, it's not somebody won and somebody lost or anything else. It's like Roquan won, he got his bag. The Ravens won, they got a player they really like. The Bears won, they got capital for a player that they didn't value necessarily at that level. It's not that they didn't like Roquan or didn't think he was a good player. He was a good player. They didn't think he was going to be worth that much money. And when you really come down to that, before you get all crazy about, the Bears have all this money and they should be paying home drafted players, home developed players. Here's the deal. If the Bears go out and draft an inside linebacker, say they get some extra capital in the second round, or they use their second round pick on an inside linebacker. I'm not saying they should. I'm saying if they do. Here's the hypothetical. The 11th pick, just to say top third of the second round. So I just picked 11th as a number. It's not the Bears have the 11th pick or that they will or anything else. The 11th pick in the second round is a slotted salary. That player, regardless, will make about $1.8 million in their rookie deal. Roquan is going to make roughly, we don't have all the contract numbers yet, and I checked with our guy Brad today, and this is the best estimate we can get. He's going to make about $21 million next year. So the Bears are saying, we got Jack Sanborn, and even if we go out and get the next Fred Warner in the second round next year, we're going to pay that guy $1.8 million a year, while Roquan is making $21 million a year in Baltimore. And both of those things are fine because the Bears aren't a team that are in a position to be paying a position like inside linebacker that does not have a ton of leverage in the modern game, $21 million a year. Like, they're just not that team. They're not that talented. They don't have that roster. It just doesn't fit with who they are, where they're building. So
Right.
Roquan gets off, make his money. The Ravens get what they want. The Bears get, more draft picks. And even if they go address it super high in the draft, 11 picks out of the first round, they pay $1.8 million. So everybody wins, and it's okay.
By the way, this is a point that I like to make. Trading is not one team wins, one team loses. The whole point of trade is that you have something that somebody else wants or needs, and they have something that you want or need, and you you make an exchange that you're both happy with. Like, trading is good. A good trade is good for both parties.
Mhm.
That's really the point of trading. You're just at different stages in your rebuild. You need different things. You value things a little differently, whatever. And the good general managers understand that, and they find ways to create that where they know that this team values this position a little bit different. That would be a good place for this guy to go, and I can redistribute over here, whatever. That's how trading should work. This idea of like Bears won this trade or Ravens won this trade or whatever. It's not. They can both win. That's what you hope for, in my opinion. And I know I get into like the business theory and stuff and whatever, but that's how I see it. Way too much classwork on negotiations and trades in my life. But that's how I see the world. So I like it. Bringing on a homebrew. I know it says spiced winter ale, and that's not your thing, EJ. But
I
I would drink a
I would
homebrew spiced winter ale.
I would try it, because the cool thing about homebrew is it can be anything from mild to wild. The variation in
Mild to
homebrew
wild. As long as it doesn't have
is
cinnamon in it, I would
no,
try.
I mean, you can get homebrew in a packet. You can literally subscribe to a
Yeah, yeah,
place and they will send you pre-measured plastic
sure.
packets that you pour into a boil.
Done it.
Yeah, I've done it multiple times with friends. Some of them are great. Some of them are clones of other beers. Hey, this is just like, Fat Tire, this is a Fat Tire clone, or this is a, famous beer clone. And a lot of times they're pretty darn good. And depending on how much skill and practice you have in putting those together, you can make a few ads or boil a little longer, or, make sure everything's clean. You can make a really good homebrew beer. So sometimes you get something that's pretty formulaic. Sometimes you get something that is alchemy great. Like, I did this and then I put jalapeno in it. What do you think? And you're like, that sounds terrible. And you try it and you're like, honestly, that really works. Like, that's really good. So I would try the spiced winter ale, even though spiced is one of those words that brings up my beer radar. But good on you for A, homebrewing, and B, for joining us with a beer. I really appreciate
Again, as long as it doesn't have cinnamon in it, I'm good. Cinnamon allergy has been
Oh,
annoying.
that's not
So,
good. That's not good.
Barlissimo, we don't have to answer this, but I'll just say this is one of the ideas that I have, is that if we have two players that are similarly ranked, that
Mhm.
we have a debate show. Like one scout takes one side, one scout takes the other, and I can be the arbiter and make the decision of who goes higher up on the board or not. So we're going to be doing shows like that, and if you have guys that you think like, hey, I got him close, like who do you rank higher? I think that could be some really fun content. So just keep that in mind as we go through this.
And to give you quick answer, barely Smo, Keely Ringo faded down the stretch pretty hard. He's going to have a lot of questions to answer. Scouts are going to ask him about the fact that he started off as a sort of preseason All-American, and everybody was saying, hey, this is one of the top guys. And down the stretch, he didn't play great. And that's just him playing against expectations of himself, which is always a sort of tough thing to measure up for when other people are setting them and they're arbitrary. But he's gonna have a lot of questions. He isn't one of those guys. We say all the time that development's not linear. He is not one of those guys that's on a sort of solidly upward swing. Very talented player, physically very gifted. Didn't play his best football at the end of the year, and it was under the brightest lights. People are going to ask him about that.
Fair enough. Derek, no punter reports. We're good with the guillotine. We'll keep him in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, I did call punters, and then I don't have to do them. How about that? That was the position group that I said I would do,
That's the
and
best. I will do this position group that we're not going to
I'm ruling
do.
it out. because we don't need it.
I love it. I love it. That's well played.
John, I mean, that's not going to happen, but I do like the idea of something for Lovey. Like, I don't know what it is, but like some sort of
Maybe he
tribute.
gets to sit in a box next year
You should feel good
he should
about.
have a
I
homecoming.
mean,
He should.
I
I wish the
like
Bears had something that the Seahawks have, which is the raising of the 12th man flag,
right, like the
which is
beating of the drum or
yeah,
the
which is a
blowing of the
great
Viking horn or like that kind
yeah.
of thing.
If they
Yeah,
had that kind of thing, like that's the perfect role for Lovey if he's not working for another team next year, is to come back and like do whatever it is that they're going to be doing at Soldier Field. So just gonna side note, Lovey's ripped. Like the
oh,
pictures of like Lovey
always
walking off
has
the
been.
field. Well, yeah, but they're
Well, he
you
was
know,
pretty skinny when he started, but like he was still. I mean, you could tell he was
yeah, you
built.
throughout his we could do a
Yeah,
whole show about
yeah.
his trajectory throughout his Bears career, and then his Illini career was not particularly as well defined, or maybe it was just the
Fair enough.
layers.
It was college football, so I
That's
didn't
true,
I
but
didn't
he's
notice
he's
it.
walking off the field and everybody's taking pictures of him, of course, because he's about to get fired, which is brutal. Dude, Lovey's been in the gym like a lot. Yeah.
Oh, that Texas barbecue. That's a
Yeah,
thing.
the opposite of that, I think.
It's protein, man.
Unless it's heavy plates that he's been lifting.
He's not hitting the sides. He's just hitting the barbecue.
Okay, all right, fair enough.
Eric says ultimate leverage the year after one of the worst quarterback drafts. That's kind of an interesting point. I hadn't really
It's a
thought of that.
great point.
Yeah,
Is that there's this drought, right? There's
yeah,
this crap. No matter what we had last year, we couldn't get it. It was unobtainium. It just didn't exist, which is why some of these quarterback trades occurred that had not occurred the year before, when a couple of quarterbacks were thought to be moving, high profile quarterbacks, and they didn't move, and there were
yep.
options. And when there were no options and your fan base is desperate, you will pay, like the Broncos did, a king's ransom for an established answer, or they thought, at the position. It's one of my favorite things about the draft, because the draft, when we talk about the draft, everybody says the players, the player evaluation, all the tape we study. Yeah, that's a huge part of it. But after that, there's a whole nother like third or maybe even 40% of the draft, which is which teams have picks and where, what's the order. And that's, of course, determined by their finish and trades and everything else. And then who are the players available in this class, which is a question you asked me about the strength of this class. And how do those two intersect? Because it is of a time. It is a fixed window. You can't say, well, I have a first round pick this year, but I don't really like any of the talent in the groups that I really need. So I'm going to defer, right? I'm going to carry that pick to next year. No, you can't. You have to spend it. You either have to trade it away for next year's pick and the uncertainty that brings, or you have to spend it on one of the players in this draft. And so it's this really, each draft becomes a really unique container of,
And if you did that last year, and then you said this year, like, hey, let me wait another year. No. You said that last year, right? Like, you don't get to keep pushing that button.
yeah, you don't get to kick that can down the road. So each draft is a thing in itself of how many picks does your team have? How high are those picks based on, what are their needs based on all their other moves, free agency and people retiring and moving on? And then who are the players available, and that's a fantastic fusion of how do all those things come together to make the spectacle that is the NFL draft. They have needs. These folks are going to trade. This person used to work with that person. And you throw all that into it and sort of mix and stir. Endlessly fascinating, at least to me.
No, it is. It's great. I love the offseason stuff. You know me, I'm a nerd. I love team building stuff. I geek out on this part of the year is fun for me. And I love the strategy piece of the draft. That's the piece I love the most is, the supply and demand, the trading. It really, as an economist, it triggers that part of my brain. So I like this. Can the Bears pay the guy who did Zach Wilson's pro day to do the top quarterbacks to bring up their stock? That's funny because the off-platform throw thing and how that just sort of took off, and the Jets got enamored with Wilson. I don't know. I still to this day does not make sense to me. It just is bizarre, but whatever.
As an aside, One of the guys that does a lot of that, who's famous in his own right, Jordan Palmer, right? Carson Palmer's younger brother, or younger, I think.
I think he's younger. Yeah,
I think he's younger. Anyways, Jordan Palmer may be at Shrine Bowl, and we may have access to getting a chance to sit down with him, which I think would be fascinating because he's not only a quarterback coach and a guy that arranges things like pro days, he's also a commentator as well. He really has his hands, and as a former player, successful player in his own right, just a fascinating guy to get to talk to. And heard that he's going to be in Vegas and that we might get a chance to pick his brain a little bit. And I think that would be amazing and on any level.
Famously backed up his brother in Cincinnati.
Yes, indeed. Yes,
that's
indeed.
so wild. I Ballard definitely sounded the bell that he is interested in trading up. I mean, that's he said it very clearly. So
you said earlier, just a second ago, can't kick the can down the road. The Colts have effectively kicked the can down the road. Give me a veteran, give me a veteran, give me a veteran. Hasn't worked. At some point, you got to say, look, it's terrible. Andrew Luck retired. It's true. We beat him into the ground and he left. We got to do something about it because it is famously the move that will make or break a GM, and it is so fickle. It is dependent. We're just talking about Zach Wilson. It is so fickle. It is one of the hardest things to do in sort of pro sports management is pick the quarterback that will lead your NFL franchise. And if you're wrong, you're going to get fired. That's it. And if you're right, you got job security for maybe another two or three bites at that apple, right? 2 or 3 extra years after that quarterback that you brought in that plays 8 or 10 years and carries your franchise to the heights, leaves. And then people will start calling for your head again because that's the job. But if you get it wrong, you're done. Your salary's done. You move your family, you quit doing what you love to do. So they have kind of deferred, thought it was going to work. It has not worked. Yes, he is desperate because he is now on the block. He has to do the toughest thing. He has to make the choice. He has to pay for it. He has to put his money, his draft capital behind it, and he has to get it right. And if he doesn't, he gets fired. And that's it. And he knows it, and so does everybody else. So, yeah, he's desperate.
Never squander a good crisis.
Great quote.
So
great quote. Love it.
Keep that in mind, folks. I brought it up in the podcast. I kept saying 4 for the Colts and all that. And that loss by the Colts, win by the Texans, so big in so many ways because it makes it so much easier for the Colts to get up to 1 and jump the Texans, who are a division rival. Like there's just 100%. So much in that works for them that Colts fans should be pretty excited that they lost that game because this allows them to then kind of screw over their divisional opponent and jump up with the Bears, who, again, they are motivated to move down. And make no mistake, they're motivated to move down here. So good stuff. And Jim, that owner is the craziest owner in the league. That guy, I would love to see just what that guy
eats for breakfast.
Yeah, I'm trying to put it in a very nice way, but there are some substances that guy consumes. That's all. That is just very obvious to me.
Barry Leishmo's got one down there. Is one of the bigger unmentioned subjects that the Bears will be number 1 in waiver claims next year to start the year. It doesn't last the entire year. They eventually adjust throughout the season, but yeah, for sure. The fact that early in the season, it is just another vehicle that Ryan Poles has at his disposal to better this team. And I will banging on my table right now, bang the table to say, I hope to God he uses it because they didn't use it this year. And I understand why. They were physically kind of sitting on their hands and saying, nope, not going to spend anything, not going to, we're getting rid of the deficit. We're not going to use any of the surplus yet. The surplus is here. We are into 2023. They have immense resources, as we've talked about, and that's one of them. And I hope they use all of them. Like, I hope they just maximize the draft and free agency and waiver claims and practice squad grabs, because again, this roster has a lot of availability, right? It has a lot of spots up for grabs where people have real chances to make a difference. And I hope they just build a 90-man roster throughout the summer that is so crazy competitive that the guys they're cutting are actually getting paid somewhere else.
John asked about the Senior Bowl. So, EJ, you know this quite well, but I'll kind of make this. So the NFL switched this where the Shrine Bowl gets the full coaching staffs this year and not the Senior Bowl. So that maybe will rotate into the future, but it's actually the Falcons and the Patriots will be the coaching staffs at the Senior Bowl, or sorry, at the Shrine Bowl.
Yes.
I don't know who will coach at the Senior Bowl. I'm sure that they'll pull some assistants from around the league. Maybe some Bears assistants will be part of that. I don't know. We can kind of speculate that the Bears were likely approached about maybe coaching one of the Shrine Bowl squads, and maybe there was just the desire to want to make sure that they kept themselves free because this is such an important offseason that they didn't necessarily want to get deep into one commitment and be able to attend both of these bowl games and not invest too much into one. That total speculation on my part, but that's what I'm sensing from what I've been hearing. So no coaching staffs, which means that I will not be going to either bowl game because I don't know. I just started a new job. I can't afford to go.
That was your kicker. But my hope is that, again, it's all of everything, right? That the Bears will be heavily invested. You look at the teams, Las Vegas signed quite a few Shrine Bowl players. Like the Raiders had, I think, 5 guys from the Shrine Bowl on their roster this year. And it was because it was in their home stadium. They spent a lot of time around those players. They got to know them, even if they weren't necessarily on the coaching staff. And those are guys that they saw as values that they were able to bring in at a value because they'd had, sort of front row seats to getting to know those players in a different way. I hope the Bears, it's hard to do because the two bowls overlap, Shrine and Senior, but I hope they're at both in force because again, they need to be, and they need to leverage that and leverage everything we've been talking about, the waiver claims, the UDFA polls, which does not have an order, but again, has preference. And if you build a relationship with the player and you see the scouts after practices, talking to them, getting their numbers, giving them their business cards, saying, hey, who's your agent? And, I really like what you did today. They need to be doing all that every day at both bowls so that when the time comes and that player maybe, slips out of the 7th round and he's getting a bunch of calls. Hey, remember we talked to you, we talked about where you'd fit. Come play with Justin Fields. We got a ton of money. We got an opportunity. We only have one fullback. You're a fullback. Let's go. All that stuff matters. And it, like you said, it just takes work, right? You got to be there. You got to put in the work. You got to put in the tape work. You got to know the player. You got to know his college coach. You got to spend some time. And I hope the Bears are spending that time because just relying on a huge war chest in free agency, we've seen that go south lots more often than it's gone well. Just saying, oh, we have 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks, we've seen that go poorly just as often as we've seen it go well. They need to just be beating the bushes, right? They need to be in every corner, rooting out talent and finding guys from all over the place because this team needs it.
Yep, 100%. I love that story.
So good.
Kid with the memes, so
good.
funny.
And he still looks the same. You could tell it's the same kid. You're like, that's
no
him.
question. I mean, it's just, and again, he became a college offensive lineman. It's just, of course he did. Of course he did. You know who we need to check up on someday is the Buffalo. You know who I'm talking about, don't you?
I do.
A Buffalo kid who won the free chicken. He's like, it's free chicken. I mean,
free chicken. What do you want?
Who doesn't love fried chicken?
The best
we need to make sure that kid turns into an offensive lineman at some point. Cause I mean, he's got it written all over him.
He's 100%. He's all set.
Yeah, no, we got to get him was it Chick-fil-A for a year or something like that?
Something like that. Yeah, I think he's like free chicken. Come on.
He's like, it's free. Like, I mean, it's free chicken. Like, it's just the 40-year-old man in like a 10-year-old body. It was wonderful. I love that. Berlissimo wants to know if you have any thoughts on his early draft crushes.
I like a lot of his early draft crushes. Brian Breesy is a name we're going to hear a lot as Bears fans because if they don't get Jalen Carter, if they do end up trading down just a few extra spots, Jalen Carter might and will go before that pick. Brian Breesy is not a consolation prize. He's a crazy talented player. Like him a lot. Keely Ringo, we talked about a little bit. Clark Phillips, we talked about a little bit. Tyree Wilson, edge rusher. 6'6", 278, like big rangy dude that can get after the quarterback, like what I've seen from him. Darnell Wright, Felix, Demarion Overshawn. Saw Demarion Overshawn live at Texas DKR. Saw UTSA versus Texas. One of the guys that stuck out as I was scouting guys for that game, as I was looking for Texas players to sort of focus on when I went to see him live. Obviously, already had the rep. Already had a strong following in the Longhorn faithful. Lives up to billing. Like that guy. Yeah, if he goes to the right place, he can be a very, very good player. So Demarion Overshawn, good dude. As an aside, his Texas teammate Roshan Johnson, who is the backup to Bijan Robinson, who is the all-world everything presumptive number one running back taken in this draft. Roshan is damn good. He's huge. And he's been living in Bijan's shadow, which is immense. Bijan is a super talented player. Roshan's going to make somebody really, really happy. So we'll see about that. Devin Witherspoon, Josh Wiley. Yeah, sure. I like a lot of those guys. They're all on my list. So lot of talent in that list for sure.
I don't have a strong opinion yet about Sean Payton. I think he'll play the field. He did this very smartly. Here's one of those things. He left the Saints because he knew that they were going to just be going. They were going to pay the bill. They had to pay the bill at some point. They didn't really pay it this year, which is the weirdest thing to me. They kind of tried
That's
to go
the
for
Saints,
it.
though. That's the Saints.
Are so weird.
They will
this stuff.
always kick the can.
They will have to pay that bill here. So
we keep saying that, but we've been saying that for a decade.
This season was gross. So if they want to keep going, 5-7 win seasons, then they can keep doing this. But like this, that's what it is. Peyton was smart to get out and take a year off, but you can tell this was part of his plan the whole time. I don't know why he'd want to go to Arizona. He likes Kyler. Why would you want to go to Arizona? Kyler's not going to play next year.
Yeah.
So why would you want to go there? Why would you want to go to Denver with that mess that they have they're tied to Russ Wilson. And
but if he believes that he can get something out of Russ Wilson, and
they all believe that they all believe,
right? And that's
I can fix him.
And Peyton might be the most, right? Because he is super talented in that area. And he might say, I think there's something there. And if he says that's it, because that is the crux question, the rest of the Denver roster, damn good. And if he can get the defensive assistant that he wants to run Fangio's system, there's talent on that side of the ball. Like that team could be better quickly if Russ played average football.
If I had to put money on it,
Sure.
You said, hey, Jeff, here's $20. Go bet on where you think he's going to go.
20 units?
No, well, that's a unit for me. But like, okay,
I know.
$20, right? But you have to bet it. You just can't pocket it and go get tacos, right? I'd want to know what the odds are for Dallas. Now I know that Dallas has a coach right now, and they're in the playoffs, and they're probably going to beat the Bucks. Like, I mean, who knows? But you're telling me that Jerry Jones isn't going to promote Mike McCarthy to some BS front office position and open up the head coaching job to bring home Sean Payton? Absolutely, he will do that. So I think that all roads lead to whatever Dallas does first. If Dallas doesn't do that, they want to keep a very mid coach like Mike McCarthy in place. Okay. But if I'm Sean Payton, I'm going to go to Dallas.
Yeah, and it has to do with the team too, because Peyton's still under contract, and the Saints will get a high draft pick. They're rattling the saber right now that it's a first rounder. And if, again, it's all market economics, this as an economist, like if there's a market for them, they'll get it. Like if they say there's two teams and the cost is a first rounder and one team says we won't pay it, the other team will. And that's significant. Giving up your first round draft pick for a coach, even as good as Sean Payton, who you and I both believe can have a huge impact wherever he goes because he is a very talented coach with a proven track record. That is a significant investment, right? Plus they have to pay him, X million dollars, which most billionaire owners don't care about.
Right.
That's throwaway money. But the first round pick does matter in terms of building. And that means that team has to be that much closer to being completely ready because you're giving up an asset that he would then be able to coach up and hopefully help impact the franchise. So it's a fascinating storyline to watch, but the price is prohibitive, not the money cost. Again, that billionaire owners are not going to even see that. Like, it's not even going to rise to the level that registers on their registers. But the first round pick is significant. And again, situation. Does Peyton believe in the offense? Does he believe in the quarterback? That has to be a strong link. Yes, coaches like Peyton believe they can fix anybody, but it's going to be fascinating because it is going to be a major storyline. We've already heard it linked to 3 of the existing openings. It'll be more by tomorrow. You won't stop hearing about it until Sean Payton is back on an NFL sideline somewhere.
He's the first domino to fall. He's a proven NFL head coach. He's a great mind. He was Sean McVay before Sean McVay existed. Like, I mean, like, he was the
did you hear that news today? I was at lunch and I was watching the scroll on the TV. The sound wasn't on. I don't typically have the TV on here, and I went out and grabbed some lunch, and McVay is allowing his assistants to look for jobs.
Yeah, he's gonna walk. He should have done it last year. He talked about it openly last year.
I agree, but that is not insignificant.
No.
Rams fans, like, that's.
I think he wanted to win one. I think he wanted to get in the booth and do other things. He's actually really a good communicator of the game. A lot of coaches are good at communicating the game. That he's not necessarily unique in that. But if you listen to his podcast series, Flying Coach, that he did with Peter Schrager, he brought on a lot of his fellow head coaches. You can tell that he loves talking about ball, talking about ball with it. So at some point, like, he's got a bit of a gift, and there is. People can say, hey, I like this color guy. I don't like this color guy. We have not had a John Madden since John Madden retired. Like, we just don't have that guy. Could he be that guy? I think he could be. Young coach, proved it, can go be that good communicator. I mean, I like Romo as much as the next guy, but we could use a coach that could break down the game in the booth. And I think that might be where he wants to go. And
he has a real talent. I would say the world is his oyster. If he moves to media, he will have any and all offers to do whatever slice or slices of that he wants to. He's incredibly gifted. He's really smart. He's obviously very driven. Photographic memory for plays and players, which is staggering. And I'm so jealous of that, because I do not have that. I have almost the other thing. I have, like, the face blindness for certain plays, and especially dates. You and
I don't. Jack is amazing. I'm not.
You and Jack both are able to do that in different ways. People are like, hey, who made the NFC playoffs like 3 years ago? And because I literally flush my short term every year with 400 draft prospects, I'm like, oh, literally, I don't know. And people are like, what do you mean you don't know? You're in football. And you're like, there's a lot of numbers and dates in football. I don't have them all in my head.
I love this idea. This is a fun idea. Lovey Beard Day at home games. I don't know if the Bears would ever sign off on it or do it, but like, that needs to be orchestrated for, like, the home opener. Like, do a Lovey Beard
and
Day.
if he's doing the thing, whatever the thing is, the flag raising, the drum pounding, the trumpet blaring, whatever,
you could do that.
Like, then you get the first 5 or 10,000 fans get, like, Lovey Beards, and they're everywhere in the crowd. I would love that.
Maybe we can make that a, like, just kind of a social media thing and try to make it
honestly
happen.
We could just do it on the Second City Gridiron channel and everybody would follow.
I don't see why not. Yeah, well, some people, right? Yeah,
everybody.
Well, but by the season, we'll get all of the season ticket holders to be in on this. Yeah, that'd be great. I like that. Those are good ideas. Keep those coming. I'd wear a Lovey beard on, like,
I'd wear it on podcast. It'd be great.
Yeah.
I wouldn't look near as good as Lovey does in it, because, hey, I haven't been hitting the gym, but whatever.
I hit the gym. I don't know that it is like Lovey, but
well, you don't have that NFL strength and conditioning program to follow.
No, I do not. I do not. I think that it probably helped them, but again, the Senior Bowl,
you bet.
Shrine Bowl and all that kind of stuff. But and I was at the Senior Bowl, and I got to be within coffee breath range of Dan Campbell, and that's a pretty cool access to be able to do that stuff. And like you said, the deals that are going on,
So
Drew,
many.
Drew Rosenhaus is 5 feet away from me, talking to a general manager that was 5 feet away from me about the hypothetical of one of his clients. Maybe if that general manager might be interested in talking, it was just literally happening 5 feet away from me, and I was eavesdropping, and I was like, this is wild. This is the wildest
is
thing
a
that I've
thing.
ever been a part of.
Weirdly enough, with the Cardinals' large amount of movement over the last week, and a not necessarily connected but somewhat connected ideal of a Coleman curse, which is a widely accepted ideal in many sectors.
Yeah, it's been
there
proven.
there was one team's power triumvirate that when we were at the 2020 Senior Bowl that we sat next to. We literally sat in the south end zone of the old stadium, Lad People Stadium, not the new what is it?
I don't remember what it's
anyways,
called.
But the new stadium where the Senior Bowl is. And it was super freezing that year. It was really, really cold. And these, aluminum bleachers, and there's only 2 sets of people. It's like me and Brett, and then like 5 or 10 rows down and maybe 2 or 3 rows over is Cliff, Kime, and Bidwell. And we were like, this is wild. Like these guys are sitting here and they're freezing their asses off and they're ready to go back to their heated mansions in Arizona. And they're talking about players, and some of these players are going to end up on the card. The whole thing. Well, they were the only ones, and it took 2 years, but they're all out. I mean, Bidwell's still there. But Kime out for health reasons, Cliff gone, done, fired. And I'm like, maybe it is real. Maybe it just has a delayed fuse.
That's a good one to end on.
Steelers fans are going to be really happy because we didn't really get anywhere near Mike Tomlin. I mean, we can still feel his aura.
Don't let Brett get near Mike Tomlin. Like let's protect him at all
let's
costs.
Protect Mike Tomlin for sure.
Yeah, so maybe I don't want to meet Brett. Maybe it'll be my downfall.
At your own risk. However, I did pick the Packers to win the division this year, so the EJ curse is a work in progress.
Oh, I picked the Vikings. So
see, it doesn't work for you.
But it's good though. You should tail me with my picks because I'm profitable.
Yes, your picks are profitable for sure.
Yeah. Overall, pretty good. I mean, that the final tally will come up. Depends a lot depends on the playoffs, but
Fitzy, good call. I appreciate that.
What's this say?
Please have EJ on the Gambler's Den post draft. We should be monetizing his. Braxton Jones will start at left tackle calls this year.
Got to get odds. Got to get a book to give you odds on that.
It's hard, but it's not impossible. We're working on it.
You can ask. You can always ask.
Well, we're working on. It's weird. The things that books can and can't bet on, depending on whether or not they are daily fantasy or whether they're actually a sports book and can bet on outcomes. It's weird. Like you can't bet on draft position because that's considered a game altering outcome. But if you are daily fantasy, you can put lines on things like combine performances. Exactly. Like a 40 time over under. You can do that if you're daily fantasy. There's a regulation there, but you can't say I will bet, this guy's draft position is the end of the second round over or under, right? That he goes higher than pick, 60, 64 or lower. But you can say, I bet he'll run greater than a 4.35.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll just say this. I'm not going to have a Gambler's Den episode where we bet on combine numbers. I'm just not that kind of degenerate. I just can't. I can't get there.
Hey, man. I'll drag you down to my level at some point.
If we did, I'll bring you on and you can, I'll just turn it over to you. And I would just let you have all the chips. Yeah. These are all the EJ's chips and my chips are nothing. I'm just along for the ride. So, all right. Well, we'll end it there. Thanks everybody for joining us. I really appreciate it. And, hour 45, happy hour, pretty good. Make sure to tip your wait staff and, give your significant other a thank you for letting you consume all of this stuff if you have one of those, and hanging out with us on a Wednesday night. We appreciate it. So see you soon.